Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Rashmita, and I am the event planner for Microsoft Reactor India. The session will run over the next 60 minutes, including Q&A. But before we begin, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat section will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. So please feel free to drop all your questions in the chat section. I would now like to welcome Aditya, our speaker for today's session. Aditya is a developer advocate at Appwrite, having worked with various technologies such as APIs, cross platform apps, cloud computing, etc. He has spent the last 5 years empowering tech communities and currently active as a Microsoft MVP. But for now, I will hand over to Aditya to begin the session. Let me bring him into the stream.
Perfect.
Hey, hi
Thanks
Aditya,
a lot.
welcome.
Hi, Rashmita. Thanks a lot for the introduction and everyone in the chat.
Hi.
Hello there. It's really good to be here on the Reactor channel after a while. I think I've had a few sessions in the past, and it's been a short little while since I've hopped on here, so I'm pretty happy to be here today. Um, Today, I think
Always,
we've
it's
already got
always
like a brief.
pleasure to have you.
Yeah, the feeling is mutual. So for today's
So
topic, I know
over to you now. I'll be at the backstage. Sorry.
that's all right. But so for today's topic area discussion that we have, I know lately, both within Microsoft circles, within the Microsoft tech community, and in general, whether it's on tech Twitter, social media, and beyond, AI and OpenAI have been major topics of discussion. And I, for one, I'm a major fan of what OpenAI has been doing and what Azure has been doing as far as their AI offerings go. I think one of the coolest recent features is actually um, their vision preview model under GPT-4, which, aside from, of course, generating text, has brought it's a multimodal LLM, which means you can now interact with files and with images and things like that as well. And so with today's talk and discussion, I'm going to spend a little more time understanding, of course, what OpenAI is, Azure, and what the Azure OpenAI service is, and what kind of facilities and offerings it has, and what you can build with it. We'll also then live code a little, see how you can end up using Azure OpenAI Service for an accessibility related use case that is generating alt text for images. So, by the way, just a little note, if I look at the right, um, that is basically because I have shifted the stream chat to the right side. So if I'm looking at the right, all I'm doing is I am um, taking a look at the chat and seeing any comments that might have been shared in the meantime. But so, when we talk about the Azure OpenAI service, I think the best place to actually take a look is, of course, the official Azure website here on, well, on the Microsoft website here. Because it gives us a good description of different use cases that Azure OpenAI is enabling. And I'm sure we've already seen examples of this in our own daily lives right now. Like I think at this point, things like ChatGPT are being discussed very often. And Azure OpenAI Service will offer you the tools to build such applications on your own, whether that is developing bots that can answer questions. Um, Essentially, we're talking about conversational AI use cases, or whether we're talking content creation, because GPT-4 and both Dolly have been heavily supporting this. In fact, I use Dolly for other use cases as well, like generating images for my personal newsletter. And you can also actually use the Azure OpenAI service to get insights on your application, on your data, your information, all of that. So there are a lot of use cases. You can always discover more of these. Um, there are some wonderful blogs that Microsoft already has, a lot of content, in fact, and um, you can always go ahead and read these in your own time. So yeah, I think with that, what we can do here is we can probably understand how you can create a resource of this sort, and maybe we can get started building. For that, there is a quick start that I would love to refer to, and that is a quick start in the Azure documentation using images, with AI chat in your AI chats, of course. I think for this quick start, Rashmita will be able to share a link with us in here as well. The one area that we want to look at here is the prerequisites section primarily. Right now, there is an Azure OpenAI limitation in the sense that you do need to apply to use Azure OpenAI. The reason this is necessary is because Microsoft has been very strict on their responsible AI guidelines and practices, and they want to ensure that it is being used for legitimate purposes, whether business oriented, or otherwise. But in general, it will be necessary to apply for access. And you can do that using the link available within the prerequisites on this quick start. Once that is done, however, you will be able to create a resource on your Azure account. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just do that. The way you would do that is we're going to go ahead to Azure. I had my account logged in. I already have the access necessary for this purpose. And what I am going to do here next is I clicked on create a resource. I'm actually just going to go ahead and search OpenAI. What's going to happen here is that the marketplace is going to show, of course, a number of different options. One of them will be an OpenAI resource specifically. I think it's taking a few seconds to load, but here we are. I'm just going to close this off. And so we're going to see an Azure OpenAI resource here, which lets us create an instance of the Azure OpenAI service on our Azure account. It'll show any necessary details you need to look at, whether that is usage information, plans, a little overview. It has the ratings and reviews as well, if you'd like to take a look at those. But that's not something we're too worried about. What I'm going to do there is I'm going to go ahead and create a resource of this service here. For this, we'll create a new resource group. I do imagine that folks here have an idea of working with Azure already. But if not, a resource group is a sort of a symbolic container that lets you keep related resources in one sort of a group here. And so, if you've got resources for a single project, it makes sense to have one resource group for that. I'm just going to call this reactor, I'll just set a name here. It'll let you know if the name is available, by the way. If not, it's going to show a cross sign and it'll let you select a different name. By the way, one thing about the vision model we have, the vision model is actually currently available in limited locations only. So when you do create an instance of the Azure OpenAI service, just make sure that you are specifically looking at the available regions only. This link is available in the quick start as well, but we want to make sure that we look at the regions available for the vision preview model. And so when you look at this, you're going to find that the vision preview is available on Australia East, France Central, Sweden Central, Switzerland North, and the West US regions at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create an instance with the West US region. In general, it's a good idea to have a region closer to, of course, your application and customer base. But in this case, because it's a demo usage, that's not a major problem here for us. I'm going to give this resource a name as well because, of course, we should. The pricing tier is the S0 tier. You can understand the exact details of this pricing here. You also have information about the content review policy that Microsoft follows. Now, this particularly is going to be important for you because it lets you know what the Azure OpenAI Code of Conduct is, how Microsoft processes data, as well as how content filtering and abuse monitoring may happen. And you can actually apply for modified filters there as well if need be. Next up, we want to define what network security we want to set for this. Now, we're going to set all networks for now because this will allow our resource to be accessible over the internet. However, if you're working within a private network, you can select selected networks and so on as well. Tags are a handy way to categorize resources, especially when you're consolidating resources for billing. Right now, however, I'm not going to set a tag because we don't need one at the immediate moment. Once you've got all of this set up, by the way, you can review the terms, you can review what you've set up, of course, in the creation process. And once that is done, you can create your Azure OpenAI resource. I'm going to take a pause for a second in the meantime just to see if we have any doubts, any questions. By the way, folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to send them over in the chat. I am consciously and actively looking here, so I'd be happy to take them on. By the way, when we do build an application with Azure OpenAI, the first step, of course, is to create a resource. The second step is that we're actually going to have to deploy a model as well, which we're going to do next. And then, of course, third is writing your code. So once our resource has been created, you can find any deployment details you'd like. All of that information is available here. And then we go to our resource. Now, when we do get a resource, you can see that we can read our resource group, our location, our subscription details, all of that. We also get access to our endpoint and our API keys. These are going to be important. However, in order to really start building anything with this model, we do need to pick out which model we want to deploy. Like, we saw this list here, right? We saw that we want to deploy the vision preview model. Similar, there are other models. And when we go ahead and when we use the Azure OpenAI service, we do consume a specific model that has been deployed. It's not just the entire service. And this way, you can pick out which model you want to use. And each of them have their pros and cons, features, benefits, costing, all of that. So the next thing we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to deploy a model. For that, what I will then do is go to the Azure OpenAI Studio, which you can do directly from the service, from the resource itself. Once this opens up, we'll then be able to pick out a model that we want to go ahead and deploy. So as you can see now, as you know, Azure OpenAI Studio is opened up. It's opened up specifically for this resource that we have. What we're going to then do is, on the left side, we see deployments. I'm going to go ahead to deployments and create a new one. So for this, it'll show you a few different base models. We need to select GPT-4 here. And then within model version, we're going to select Vision Preview. Once we do that, the next thing to do is pick a deployment name. I'm going to set this as MSFT Reactor Demo for now. There are a few advanced options. We don't need to worry about that too much. Then there is, of course, the tokens per minute rate limit. Now, this is important for applications in production because you need to set rate limits, of course, of usage so that your application doesn't face abuse. And these are, when we see 60, for example, this is 60 multiplied by 1,000, the number of tokens that will be available. For this deployment right now, I do see that there is a 20K token limit. 20K tokens is available. I'm just gonna lower it for now anyway. Uh, but the max that we can do is 20,000 tokens. So that corresponds with 120 requests per minute. But I'm just going to lower it for now because we don't need to worry too much about that. In case, however, you set a lower limit and you want your quota to increase based on usage, you can enable dynamic quota as well. I'm going to keep this off for now because, of course, it's not something that I need to immediately use. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a deployment. So as we can see here, my deployment has succeeded, which is wonderful. Now that we've got a model deployment available, we've created our application here and things like that. What I'm going to go ahead and do next actually is I'm going to create an application that we can use here, that we can actually leverage and we can use to, well, actually try out this model. You can also actually do that in the playground, by the way, if you like. There is a chat playground within the OpenAI Studio that lets you try the same stuff as well. So if suppose I want to, if I want to actually try out our facility before we create this application, I'm actually going to go ahead and just do that. I'm going to add a little text here. We'll upload an image. I've got an image from Dolly, which looks kind of nice. And so I'm going to generate all text for this image. Now, this interface, of course, must feel similar to what we've got with ChatGPT because it is effectively the same functionality here. We added a message and it's generated an alt text here that's, corresponds to this image and you can use to make your content more accessible. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to actually build this out. For that purpose, I am going to now create a SWKit application. One second, I'll just need to pause my screen share once. I'll just bring my screen up back in a short bit, not a problem. But I'm going to need to pause it for a quick second here. By the way, any questions so far? If there are, please keep them coming in the chat. They're going to be very, very handy here at all points. So I'm going to keep an eye out for this anyway, but you can send me your questions in whenever you like. All right. Now that I do actually want to build this out, I'm going to go ahead and create a SWKit application. Now, SWKit is a web app framework similar to Next.js or Nuxt. It is a JavaScript based framework. It's a framework I've been building a lot more with. I'm actually particularly fond of it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a SWKit application here. The way to do that is we use npm, of course, for this purpose. There's a simple command, npm create Svelte at latest, and we're going to use this to create a SWKit application. That's a good question. Actually, I'll tell you what, I just realized I'm in the wrong directory. I'm just going to go ahead to my desktop here. So let me clear out my screen and we'll go ahead and create our SWKit application now. So for this, I'm going to call my project MSFT Reactor Azure OpenAI Demo. Now, SWKit does offer a couple of templates by default. The first is a demo application which shows SWKit features. The second is a skeleton project which offers the bare bones scaffolding. And the third is a library project if you want to create a library for Svelte apps, which would be similar to like a NuGet package, for example, or something on pip for our Python users. I'm going to create a skeleton project for now. Now, for this particular project, I'm just going to use JavaScript. If you want to use TypeScript, you can always go ahead and do that. And I don't need some of these additional options for now. So we'll just go ahead and create our application. Now, next thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to just enter this particular project directory. As recommended, we'll install the necessary, dependencies that are already present within the scaffolded application. I'm not going to do the Git initialization yet because we'll do that later on. But once this is done, I am going to go ahead and I am going to open this in VS Code. So with VS Code, you can see that there is a little file structure that this is created for me already. We're going to have a few important folders to keep in mind. We've got the source folder here, which features the bulk of our application. We have the static folder, which will feature static files like your favicon. There is, of course, the kit ignore, which we use when we set up Git later and push this project to GitHub. There is the package.json, which acts as which is where we'll find any dependencies that are installed, and of course the README. A couple of Svelte kit specific files we'll see here is the Svelte config, which allows you to set up the Svelte adapter for deployment. And now the adapter is actually quite handy because this lets you deploy, of course, your application on different hosting platforms. The adapter auto package that we have here, it's company installed. If you want to install an adapter specific to a platform, you can do so as well. And this actually supports a number of environments, including Azure Static Web Apps. So you can leave this as the default option by now. Similarly, the Vite config is another configuration for Vite, which is actually a really cool build tool. It was developed by the Vue.js team, but I think at this point, Vite is being used across the JS ecosystem. We use it for SWKit. I know React also, supports Vite, and it's just been a great tool. It has a number of features like bundling, hot reload, hot module replacement, like which is the term within this, but it looks like if you have hot reload within your Blazor applications and so on. So it's a great build tool there. And both of these, they'll like the Vite config, it can let you set up any Vite preprocessors and things like that if you're working with an application that needs so. Now, the source folder is particularly important for us because it features a few really, really important files. The app.html is the first one. This, of course, is the overall HTML file. When SvelteKit renders your files, it does so within the app.html. So when you do need to add any metadata pertaining to the entire web application, one way is to actually update things within your app.html. Roots is the next big one because this helps us define different roots within your application. So if you've got different paths like the index path, or suppose you want any other ones, this uses like a folder based routing system. So each folder acts as a different root and so on, which makes life a little easier. And the library is where the lib folder is where we keep our SDK related files, and just any library. If you need to add any code, it's handy to have. We're not too worried about the lib folder for this particular project. I'm going to go ahead and remove it for now. But in general, it's good to have a lib folder to separate out and abstract any logic that you might have. I'm going to go ahead and remove this for now. Then we're going to go and, we're going to look at this plus page.svelte app. Now, this is how Svelte names its files for each different page. The one that's available in the roots folder by default is your index page. So when I actually deploy this or run this rather, for now, this page is going to get rendered on my local host, of course. Yep, we can see that. I'm going to go ahead and actually create a little UI for us. Just simple HTML for this particular application. What I'll also do here is I'll create two different things. Now, of course, for this particular demo that we have, I want to get an image and generate alt text for it, right? So I'm going to create an input for an image. This will be an input of the file type. The name, that's something I can let go. I'll set the ID as image input. I'll do one specific thing here, however, I will limit the files that can be inputted to images particularly. And I will actually add this little handler here. Now, what the on input handler here will do is the moment a file is inputted, it can be used to trigger a specific function that we have. This is going to be handy as we go forward. So suppose, for example, I go ahead and if I have a function, I'm going to keep this async already because I know for a fact we're going to need this to be asynchronous. But suppose I have a function get alt text. And for now, all this is going to do is it's going to have an alert. And I call this function here. What's going to happen is the moment we actually input an image, any image, it's going to create an alert, which is great, pretty handy. Actually, why don't I do one thing? I'm going to just add this here for now. The next thing we do want to do, of course, is we want an area where we can actually get the alt text as well. So for that, I'll just create a further little part on this little page here. Now, one thing that I have done here is I've added this little variable in curly braces. This again is a Svelte feature particularly that lets us more easily use variables within our script and load them into our page. So it actually makes life a little easier here. Now, of course, with this particular application, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to use this and, well, get alt text. So I am going to do one more thing next, and I am going to, well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and install the Azure AI SDK for JavaScript. And so, by the way, you can also get this. It's the documentation for this is available on the Azure documentation, and I think Rashmita can actually share a link for the OpenAI SDK in the chat. we should be seeing that in the chat very soon. Once you have that, I'm going to go ahead and actually install this within the application. For that, I am quickly going to close this off. We'll install the SDK. All right. Once it's installed, we can use this SDK within our application. Now, we've installed this already, but we're going to need this in a few moments and not immediately. What we want to do here is, so with Azure AI particularly, there are two ways to work with this data. One way, of course, to get alt text is you send a URL of an image. However, unless you're uploading these images here, getting the URL that is publicly accessible is going to be tricky. So what we'll do then is, the other way you can actually consume these images is by generating a base 64 string. So what I will do here now, using the inputted file, first I'll create a base 64 string, and then we will send this to an additional function where we'll be able to get our, we'll be able to get the alt text from. So first thing I'm going to do here is we'll get an image. Now I know for a fact that the element is image input, right? So I'm going to get this using DOM. We'll get this particular element, and then we can get the file from here. I'll actually not keep this constant. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to initialize the file reader, and we will use this file reader to read the image, and this way we'll be able to get back our base 64 from here. Now, in order to access this particular information, we're going to have to use the onload function that we have here. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and actually get back this base 64 now. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's do one more thing. Let's also render this image in our DOM here, because why not? It's always nice to be able to see the image that we've loaded in. I'm just going to call this image, and I'm going to actually set a maximum width just to make sure that a large image doesn't actually blow up. So I'm going to go ahead, get this element as well. We're going to load the information from this particular element here now. So once we get this information, what we can then do is we can actually use this source to get our base 64, send it over to the OpenAI function, and get back our alt text. Now, in order to do that, we do need to consume the OpenAI SDK. But for that, it's not always the best idea to do that on your client application, because the issue that comes up at times is that, well, people have private endpoints and private API keys. And if you use this on the client directly, that's going to be a problem, right? You're exposing private information. Fortunately, however, because SWKit lets you build full stack applications, you can actually create server only routes as well. So if suppose I have this, I've created a new route, all text, and I create a new file under this plus server.js. This function is actually only going to be accessible on the server side, so none of this information will end up getting exposed. So what I'm going to do here now is, since we already installed the OpenAI SDK, I am going to go ahead and, well, load the OpenAI client as well as another um, like we also need another import from this library, the Azure key credential, because these are necessary to, initialize the client and use our, you know, this particular information that we have here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create, that is not an import I needed. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a post handler function, and what this function will do is it will handle any post requests that it gets. Next thing we're going to set up here, and I'm just going to quickly get this out of the way. I'll create three different constants here: endpoint, API key, and deployment name. For the purposes of the video, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to directly write them and hard code them. However, when you're building a production application, please use a key value store or your environment variables or something like that. Do not hard code your keys ever. So for the deployment name, we created our deployment name as MSFT Reactor Demo. I'm going to go ahead and, well, paste this here. And of course, we had our resource. We've got the endpoint and the API key here as well. I know hard coding is not a great idea, but I am going to end up, well, destroying these keys immediately after the session. I'll destroy this resource immediately after, so it's not going to be a major problem. Plus, it's fairly rate limited. At the immediate moment, it's not going to cause any trouble. The next thing that we actually want to do here is, well, I do want to go ahead and get the image data, right? Now, when we send a request to this, and we're going to do this, yeah, we're going to do this a little later, but when we do send this request, we're going to need to get our image base 64 out of it. So I'm just going to write the logic for that off my head here, image, just right now. We're going to get and convert, the request, and we'll just get the JSON body from it, and we'll save our image base 64 here as well. Now, once this is done, let's go ahead and initialize our OpenAI client. So for that, what I'm going to do here is I will create an object of the OpenAI client type. We'll add the endpoint that we got, and then of course the Azure credential, the Azure key credential, which we'll use with the we'll use the API key here essentially. Once this is set up, we can now use this client to send requests to the Azure OpenAI service. For that, first, however, we do want to create a message as well. Like, for example, when we saw the chat playground, we noticed that there was a certain message we put in right in the chat box. We want to emulate that here so that we can send through a message to the Azure OpenAI service. So I'm going to go ahead actually and create a messages um, object, and this is being done in the specific format that we need to use for the Azure OpenAI service. So that's the only thing to keep in mind. So within this, of course, the first thing we're going to do is add a message of the type text, because we do want to actually tell this, well, we do want to tell this to actually generate all text for us, right? Second thing we're going to do here then is we're going to add an image URL. And for this, I did forget this needs to be an array as well. So I'm just going to fix that. Now this here, what we're going to have is we're going to create a type of image URL. Now this is syntax you do need to follow here. It is something that is well mandated, of course, by the SDK itself, by the API. So just make sure you follow these properly. Within the URL, now you could either have like a publicly deployed URL or you can have the base64. So we're going to keep the base64 here. And we're also going to have a detail field. Again, just following specifications and properties from the syntax recommended for this particular SDK. With that, we do have our messages set up at least. So once this is done, we're then going to go ahead and generate a chat completion. And so what the chat completion is going to do here is we send in these messages, it generates completion for us, and we are able to then, of course, we get a response back. So what we're going to need here is we'll need the deployment name, we'll need the messages, and I'm going to pass an additional option here and set a limit on the max tokens per request, which will be 200 for this one. Once that is done, we will be able to get the alt text through this actually. So keeping in mind the structure of a completion, this is, of course, I do add this knowing what structure it will have. We can also actually log this here if we want to. So after that, all we need to do is we just need to return a response back to, you know, our function after this. And it's just all this is going to do is it'll just return a response. By the way, for a production application, make sure you add a little more error handling. I haven't done that at all, but it's a good idea to do that. Now, since we've created a server function, what I'm going to do next is I will, well, send a request to this route that we have. We've got this route. What I then need to do next, of course, I'm going to change this up, and I will actually just going to directly send the image element source here. But the good news with this is once we make this request, ideally what will happen is this will send a request to, of course, this particular post handler that we have. We do not need any of these. Sorry about that. And it will return a response back to us with the alt text. So I am going to be able to get our JSON once again and update this response body and get the alt text back from it. Let me just double check how it is kept. And yes, that is the way. So with that, our function should ideally be ready to test. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that now. So hopefully when we send this request, we should see this work now. Let's see. I'm going to send in. Okay. We use this image here and I happen to get an error because why not? Oh, my bad. That was supposed to be, well, yeah. See, details like that are, where you can make mistakes, and this is exactly why we need error handling. Now I'm just going to keep things a little simpler. We'll just use this particular image I have. And so I get another error for some reason. Am I messing this up somewhere? Or did I forget to save this entirely? Let me see if we can do without this. But you see, this is exactly what happens. When you live code, you're gonna face errors. Hopefully that's not gonna happen this time, but we can see something. And it's having trouble reading 0 at line 31. Oh. I'll tell you what, why don't I do one thing and I'm going to log the entire result once because I might be messing up, well, the structure of this particular JSON. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and send this file once again. And that should give us some clarity as to where things are going wrong. Okay. I see what happened there. Yeah, that wasn't completions, that was choices. Well, welcome to live coding. That's what happens when you live code. Right. Either way, now we should be able to get a response here. So the moment that works, we get a message here saying that the image shows the human-like robot with intricate mechanical details and so on. We've just received this alt text from our function, which is great. We were able to use Azure OpenAI to create this data for us. What I'm going to do here now is, just because we're going to take this up to GitHub now, let's go to the server function. I'm going to remove these details. Just replace this with Azure OpenAI endpoint. Similarly, Azure OpenAI API key and Azure OpenAI deployment name. And we can close this off. Now, I'm going to go ahead and publish this to GitHub. It'll be a public repository. So if someone does want to take a look at this, they'll be able to do that as well. That is not going to be a problem. And yeah, I know you mentioned about rotating the API keys. I'm actually just going to go ahead and actually delete this resource group altogether. That was my plan. Because of course it's a demo resource group. I'm not going to need this later on. So I'm going to go ahead and actually delete the resource group and the resources entirely. But with that, of course, what we now, I think I have this on GitHub now. So this project's available on GitHub. You can check it out. I'm gonna send this link to Rashmita, of course, so we can forward this to the chat and people can try it out. And that's good for my demo actually, and our talk day. Now at this point, I think we can just hop into Q&A as need be. That's totally okay. I mean, the repo is going to have the little demo we created. And of course, if you rewind through the video, you will be able to find any content that we discussed through this little session. By the way, Hamza, thanks a lot for mentioning choices. I did realize that, between all of those intricacies, it's always easy to mess up just one little variable name. But that's coding for you. Do we have any other questions?
I think we don't, Aditya. And folks, if you have
That's all right.
questions later, please feel free to reach out to Aditya. His social handles are already updated on the meetup page, but I can again post in the comment section for all of you.
Also, that's my Twitter handle. Twitter is always a good way to reach out. So if you'd like to do that, Twitter is always a good way to connect. LinkedIn is the same. But yeah, it was actually great presenting. Thanks a lot for joining in and participating.
Yep, I think we are good for today. Thank you so much, Aditya. It's always pleasure to have you. And thank you all for joining us today. Please visit Microsoft Reactor website for more upcoming sessions. And feel free to use all the links which I've already shared in the chat section. This will give you access to take your learning further. Thank you all once again and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Aditya. Bye.
Bye.